Good evening and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. My name is Steve Kerrigan. I'm the co-chair of the New Frontier Network, and we are thrilled to have so many folks here today to join us for our first in this 2015 season forum. In particular, we're thrilled to welcome two of Dorchester's own, Mayor Marty Walsh of Dorchester and CNN's own John King, who are joining us here this evening. Because they're both from Dorchester, the first three questions have to be Dorchester related. Just telling you guys that right at the outset. We also want to welcome all of the members of the mayor's administration who have joined us here this evening, as well as his most trusted advisor and partner, the First Lady of the City of Boston, Lori Higgins, who has joined us here in the front row. 3 years ago, we started the New Frontier Network as a way to get younger generations of people inspired again to President Kennedy's legacy of civic engagement and public service. Through forums like this, events, and other service opportunities across the Commonwealth in Boston, we've done just that. We've engaged over 150 members thus far, and we grow each and every week to more heights and more membership. So we're very excited to have such a successful endeavor in the last 3 years, and excited to have all of you here to join us. If you have not heard about the New Frontier Network, please go to jfklibrary.org or see one of us New Frontier Network members, or see the director, who is fabulous, our director, Sarah Stefani, who is right over there. Wave your hand in the air at the end of this to learn more about our program. But without further ado, I do want to bring up a great friend of mine for many years, and a tremendous supporter of the New Frontier Network, and the Chief Executive Office of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, Heather Campion.
Thank you very much, Steve. He's an outstanding cheerleader for the New Frontier Network. It's my pleasure, along with my colleague Tom Putnam, sitting in the front row here, the director of the Kennedy Library, to welcome you to this national treasure. It's one of only 13 presidential libraries in America, and devoted to inspiring new generations with President Kennedy's timeless vision and ideals. This is not only the first New Frontier Network forum of the season, but it's also the first forum we've held since our museum downstairs has reopened, having undergone a substantial renovation for the first time here in over a decade. So we hope you'll come back to see it. It's now full of new technologies, including remastered films where you'll be able to see President Kennedy delivering some of his most iconic speeches, now on very big screens in living color, and explore much more of our collection through interactive displays. It's really a whole new way to experience the ideas, the courage, and the inspiration and imagination that President Kennedy brought to our world. Here in our forum, we've also introduced new technologies recently, enabling people all over the world to view these programs, which are now being live streamed and are available on our website. And this is thanks to generous support from our sponsors, our leading sponsors, Bank of America, the Boston Foundation, the Lowell Institute, and Viacom. Our media partners also help us to make these forums more widely available to the public, so I want to thank the Boston Globe, Xfinity, and WBUR for that. And it's now my pleasure to welcome two nationally recognized leaders from our own neighborhood here in Dorchester to the John F. Kennedy Forum. The mayor of the great city of Boston, Marty Walsh, who hails from St. Margaret's Parish here in Dorchester, and one of our country's top political reporters, CNN's John King, who grew up on King Street in Dorchester, and who I believe hails from St. Mark's Parish. And if I've got that wrong, you can blame our board member, Jim Brett. Marty Walsh is the 54th mayor of the city of Boston. He's also the first mayor in over a century to have no living memory of President Kennedy. And yet, as a first-generation Irish American whose parents hail from County Galway and who grew up in the neighborhood where Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy was born, this young mayor cannot help but have a deep connection to President Kennedy. This was evident on his first foreign trip as mayor to where else but Ireland, where he was welcomed as, quote, Connemara's Kennedy, and where he quoted President Kennedy several times including his parting words, "I am taking, as I go back to America, all of you with me." In his first year as mayor, Marty Walsh has been dedicated to making Boston a thriving, healthy, and innovative city. He's championed efforts to extend the school day, bring billions of dollars of new development here, provide a housing plan of 53,000 affordable units in the city by 2030, and introduced new technology and data-driven methods to improve the delivery of city services. He has also supported the arts, where he created a cabinet-level position in the new Chief of Arts and Culture and doubled the Boston Cultural Council's funding. In just over a year, we in Boston have been the beneficiaries of his vision and his grit. Since becoming mayor, he's kept up a grueling schedule, 7 days a week, which included a winter of never-ending snowstorms and all the challenges that we know ensued from that. The mayor is indeed the personification of Boston Strong, and we're honored to have you here. And our moderator this evening is the chief national correspondent for CNN, John King. But here in Boston, he's known, as his older brother Richard calls him, Johnny from Dorchester. John King cut his teeth in the world of journalism just up the street, where he began working as a paper boy for the Boston Herald, riding his bicycle around the city and making early morning deliveries. His first real job in journalism came in 1985, when he started as a writer for the Associated Press, first in Providence, then Boston, then Washington, D.C. And during his 12-year tenure at AP, he covered major international events, national political stories, and led their presidential election coverage in 1992 and 96. He then joined CNN, and in a variety of roles there since 1999, he's been one of the leading voices and contributors to our national political dialogue. He's also been an innovator, having pioneered the use of CNN's interactive magic wall during the 2008 election, using then new technologies to display the election results for greater visual impact and understanding. It seems so fitting in President Kennedy's library to have a mayor and a journalist from the two professions he most admired, both from the city he loved so dearly, in this forum. Mayor Walsh and John King, welcome home, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, for the very kind introduction. Good to see you, Steve, as well. A lot of friends here in the room tonight. Last time I came here, I got in trouble for one of the things I said that was recorded on camera, so we'll see how much trouble I can get into tonight. And two, a lot of my old neighbors and friends showed up without me knowing it, so if you're here to surprise me again today, that's great. Can't see you sometimes with the lights. Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you.
Oh, John, thank you. And Heather, thank you as well, and Steve for that introduction. You sounded like you were introducing two heavyweights in a fight, hailing from the St. Mark's Parish.
So we were deciding on the way in to have our St. Mark's, St. Margaret's showdown, and how would we do that? Would we arm wrestle? Would we go back-to-back 40 paces? And I decided, first one wet, wins or loses. See how that goes. Let me start with this basic question. Now that I'm back for the day, and I tried to get here, and I'm the reason we're late starting the event, so what about the traffic?
We're working on it. No, that came up in the campaign, honestly. And Felix Royer said, you know, what are you going to do about the traffic in Boston? And I just, you know, what can you say? We're gonna ban cars.
What can you say?
and these days, we can't even say take the T. We don't know what we do.
Score one for the mayor. Do you want to make the announcement that this will be the beach volleyball court?
Yeah, we're sizing up right now outside. I can't do that. I'll get myself in trouble. I know Laura, my press secretary said she's sweating over there right now.
She should be. Let me start with a couple of Olympics questions. I want to spend, and for those of you in the audience, we're going to spend a few minutes up here talking. I'm going to ask the mayor about some of his day-to-day grief. This will be my version of spring training. And then we'll invite some questions. And I do want to spend most of my time talking about sort of how a year in has sort of changed your perspective, what it's like to be a CEO, lessons learned good, lessons learned maybe not so good. Well, let's start with a few topical things, because one of the big challenges you've had to deal with is this what could be a fabulous opportunity for the city is the Olympic bid. And in recent days, there's been some back and forth about accountability, about rumors about the USOC, about even talk that you're not happy with the current CEO of the operation. So let me start there. Should John Fish stay? John Fish go? Is he have the mayor's support?
John Fish should stay. I mean, he's really the basic cheerleader here that got us to this point, got us the bid from going up against three other cities. I mean, that process that happened when I first became the mayor, Boston was in the contention to host the Olympics, at least for the United States, to go on to the world to host the Olympics. I think there was about 9 or 10 cities that put their application in. It came down to 4 cities. Boston was one of the 4. We presented against those 3 other cities, and we won. And I think that in itself makes a big statement for where we are as a city. We beat Los Angeles, we beat San Francisco, and we beat Washington, D.C. Thank you. You know, over the last few weeks, yesterday I was seriously, sometimes the press, and I'm not saying all the time, takes comments and kind of twists it a little bit.
No way.
And I never call for the replacement of John Fish. What I said was that John is an ambassador for the Olympics. He's somebody that cares deeply about the city and somebody who cares deeply about this Olympic bid. But we have to grow as an organization. And you're talking about creating an organization that's really a Fortune 500 company that's going to be in existence potentially for 9 years, and when the Olympics are over, it's done. And I think that the way I look at the Olympics, the way you started the question, this is an amazing opportunity for the city of Boston to really go around the world and promote itself to 110 different countries to talk about our strengths. And my concern that's happening today is that, and Shirley Leung in the Boston Globe really captured it yesterday in the story when she said that people are looking at Boston with a different light today. That's not who we are. What's happened with the Olympic bid, I think a lot of outside distractions have come in here, and a truly vetting of the process hasn't happened. I'm assuming in this room there are some people supportive, some people not supportive, and some people don't really know what to do. And you're probably leaning against it because of what you've read in the newspaper. It's not about the conversation about whether or not we host an Olympics and what it means for the city of Boston. It's about what's been reported in the paper, first with the joiner agreement, then the ballot question, and then the salaries, all of this stuff, transparency, all this stuff bubbled up. Now I'm hopeful that we can have a true discussion about what the Olympics would mean for Boston.
So there's no gag order on my question?
No.
Okay. Let's get a little bit more into that. You've talked about the possibility that from somewhere new revenues will have to come from for the infrastructure improvements. Where in this political environment?
Well, a lot of the money that's going to be paid for the venues is going to be money that's going to be paid. First of all, I'll go back to the Olympic Games. The tickets that go into the event, that money comes into paying for infrastructure, not infrastructure roads, but the facilities that are happening. There's revenues from TV. There's big TV revenues here when you're talking about Olympic bid. I believe NBC has the Olympics this year, so there's going to be a lot of revenue coming into the bid. There's going to be opportunities for economic development. We're talking about using college campuses as places to build venues, where colleges would build a lot of the venues and be able to use them afterwards, obviously, to enhance their school as far as saying there was an Olympic competition there. That's where the money's going to come from as far as building the venues. The money for the infrastructure, that's going to be public money. But to be quite honest with you, wherever the venue is, we need the infrastructure upgrade regardless. And we're looking at the city of Boston at a transportation plan around the city to improve our infrastructure. One example, I'll give you one quick example. In 2012, New York was going for the 2012 games. They weren't successful getting the games. But what was left over after the fact was they had a conversation about Brooklyn Bridge Park. They had a conversation about Brooklyn Bridge. In the planning process for the Olympics, they came up with a way to build a park at the base of Brooklyn Bridge, something that hadn't happened in decades. And what did that do? That opened up a 1.3 square mile waterfront property to do economic development that's happening right now as we speak. The MBTA in Boston. We look at the MBTA. 1997, when the first year I was elected state representative, we did a piece of legislation that was reforming the MBTA. We supposedly reformed the MBTA, but we put no money into infrastructure. It wasn't reformed. In 2000, and I believe 10, there was another reform effort at the legislature to reform the MBTA again. That didn't help the MBTA move along. What the Olympic conversation forces us to do is, as we're getting towards the bid in 2017, we need to come up with a plan to improve the MBTA, because by 2024, if we get the Olympics, it has to be improved. If we don't get the Olympic bid in 2017, what's left behind? A plan on how to improve the MBTA by 2024. So there's an opportunity here for us to really take this as a catalyst in some cases.
As a new mayor, are there also risks for you personally? Because you're going to be associated with this, even though a lot of the decisions aren't yours.
No, there certainly is. I mean, you know, when I was polled, my poll numbers before the first snowstorm was 73% favorability. My poll numbers after the second snowstorm was 63 favorability. So 10% of the people either thought I was responsible for the snow or something was going on. No, certainly there's a risk to some degree, but it's also a risk. The risk I'm taking isn't about bringing the Olympics to Boston. The risk I'm taking is about promoting the city of Boston and putting us further on a world-class stage to enhance economic opportunities in our city.
So as a leader and a guy who has to lead the communication for the city and to, I assume you want to convince anyone here who's either on the fence or opposed, at least give us a chance to listen to us. What's been wrong with the conversation so far? You mentioned you blamed some of it on our business, and I'm sure we're not.
When I say I'm not necessarily blaming that one story about John yesterday, but no, and I commend the press for holding everyone's feet to the fire, and that's what their job is to do, and I think the press should continue to do that. I think what's happened is when we got out of the gate, the joint agreement in the very beginning, there was a clause in there that said that I couldn't allow city employees to talk ill of the Olympics. That should not have been in there. We fixed that. I think the United States Olympic Committee understands that going forward, that cannot be in a document. The second piece of it is the ballot initiative. There was always a concern about announcing that we would support a ballot question because it would look bad internationally. And in fact that Germany does ballot questions all the time regarding the Olympics. That was straightened out. That will not happen again. The transparency piece about releasing salaries was something that was the people, the public was all over. It's something, even though it's a private entity, it's something that I think people have to understand that even though the Olympics is a private entity, it's perceived as a public entity, and it has to have the same transparency as I have in City Hall. Those three issues have been resolved. Now I'm hoping as we move forward here, we can have a dialogue and a conversation about the benefits of the Olympics. At the end of the day, when I have to sign the document to say that we're going on to compete for the world, if there's not a 100% guarantee in that document that the city of Boston is not financially responsible for 1 penny of overruns, I will sign the document. If the document does not give me that surety that we will have to take some responsibility, I will not be signing the document.
Okay. What personal lessons do you draw from the early weeks and months of this, and how the leadership and the communication have been handled, both whether it's yourself or whether it's others, and how to better coordinate and lead?
I think I've noticed some comparisons to kind of my first 3 months in office to the first 2 months after the Olympic bid, learning to make sure that you do the proper due diligence before you speak, before you put out a proposal. In my first few months of office, and people don't like me talking about this, but I think we made a mistake. I made a mistake when we talked about residency, the way that it was rolled out, and something that we're going to work to file something with the city council to extend residency, and there was a big pushback from the community, the entire community of Boston, not everybody, but a lot of enough people. Even though I had the support of the Boston Globe and Boston Herald saying you should make changes to the residency clause, we listened to the people of Boston saying we're very concerned about the way you're approaching this. You learn a lesson that way, and as a new mayor, going from the State House, being one of 160 and representing a district of 40,000 people, to being the chief executive officer of a city of 640,000 people is very different. So you learn going from process to basically action every single day. At the legislature, if there's a piece of legislation, there's a process. You work through the process, you meet with the advocates, you meet with the opponents, and you form your opinion and you vote on a piece of legislation. As mayor of the city of Boston, people want the answer today. People want the answer right now. So it's a very different job. I think the Olympic movement was similar to that. You have to learn the press in Boston is very aggressive. The people of Boston are very aggressive in the sense of wanting to know all the answers right away. And I think we all should have been more prepared coming out of the box.
What is it like personally to follow an institution? A guy who'd been in the office for a long time. Is it a higher bar? Is it just a different bar? I assume Jason Veritex had no field goals during your tenure.
No, he hasn't. It's a different bar. I think, I thought myself it would be very difficult in the sense of it is difficult in a lot of ways. Tom Menino left the city in very strong fiscal shape. We had at the time we had a AAA bond rating in Standard & Poor's and a AA bond rating in Moody. Big reserve built up, very fiscally conservative when it came to moving the city. When I came in, understanding that the importance of doing that, but also I think people understand that Tom Menino was here for 20 years, and they were kind of curious about, because we had a very good mayor's race. There were 12 of us in the race, and we had a lot of conversations about different things that we would change. And I think by the time the race started till the race ended, people were curious about what way the city would go. And, you know, but Mayor Menino is still loved. Every day, somebody will come up to me and tell me a story. They took a picture. I get this every day. When somebody takes a picture, we have a picture with Mayor Menino. We want a picture with you. I get that every single day.
You mentioned your race a little bit. Your race was crowded at the beginning. Let a guy from Washington ask a non-Boston question of a prominent Democrat. I assume you're for Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden's a friend of this city and a friend of you, I believe, friend of the labor movement. Martin O'Malley, someone you know. Do you think there should be a free ride, or do you think there should be a feisty Democratic nomination?
No, I think there needs to be a race. I don't think anyone should have a free run on anything. You know, the mayor's race we had here in the city of Boston really had us all thinking, and I think by the end, some of us were talking about each other's ideas, and some of the ideas that we're doing in City Hall are other people's ideas, because it's important to have that race. I think if you get a free run, you take it for granted, and you don't appreciate it when you get there. And I think in order to have that fight, it makes you a better person, a better elected official as time goes on. I think it's important for us to have a Democratic primary. I'm a Democrat. I'm a strong supporter of whoever the nominee is. I'll be with them all the way. But I think it's important to have that Democratic fight because it'll bring out the best in each candidate.
Let me ask you another national question based on your personal experience. You're a Catholic kid from Dorchester, yet someone who, from very early on in your career, has been out in front on LGBT issues. We're watching Indiana, we're watching Arkansas, and we're watching the domino effect of that. A national conversation that might actually turn out being a good thing. It didn't start, I don't think, in the best of tones. I think everybody can agree on that. But you have a national conversation that also becomes a political conversation within the Republican Party. I'm not here to ask a Democrat to beat up on Republicans. I'm here from your perspective as a leader. How do you deal with those issues when you know, from your earlier experience, it was going to be either the church was going to be mad at you or some other constituency group that disagreed with you is going to be mad at you? How do you have the, let me ask it this way, from what you've seen in Indiana and in Arkansas, what did they do wrong if they wanted to have this conversation, to not do it in a respectful way?
First of all, I think lessons can be learned from Massachusetts. In 2004, when the Supreme Court came down and ruled that gay marriage was legal in Massachusetts, people immediately took sides. I spoke to representatives and senators at the time to support, vote against the DOMA Act that was happening through the legislative process, through the Constitutional Convention. Some of those reps and senators voted the opposite of the way I did, and today they regret their vote. And I think today in Massachusetts, when you look back on that, a lot of people saying, I can't believe that we had that fight back in 2000. What was the fight all over? Because the sky didn't come crashing down. Marriage didn't stop. A lot of things didn't stop. And I think what's happening in these other states, I think somebody are going to look back on it and say, you know, it's very unfortunate what's happening. Listen, in the country of Ireland, they're having a national conversation right now about gay marriage in Ireland. And if you think about that on the ballot across the country, that's something that I would never have expected 5 years ago, never mind today. I think it's unfortunate what's going on around the country. I think some of these folks that are taking the positions they're taking, some of the governors that are taking those positions, they're going to regret it somewhere down the road. Not necessarily at the ballot box, but they're going to be sitting back at some point. Like I've heard senators and reps come to me saying, you know something, you were right, I regret that vote.
The wrong side of history argument is the argument you made.
And you know, that issue for me, the gay marriage issue for me was a civil rights issue. I think from my time, from our generation, it was the last civil rights fight that was left to happen. And I've said this more than one time, that's the proudest vote I ever took, because I gave people the opportunity to get married, or I didn't give them the opportunity to get married. I took the vote so that the right for marriage wouldn't be taken away. And the only thing I'm upset about, I think the legislature of Massachusetts, we should have got there before the Supreme Court did.
Do you, I'll let them. I'm jumping around a bit, but I want to get your thoughts on a number of issues. Do you keep track on a daily basis of the Marathon bombing trial, or do you try to just say, I don't want to think about that?
No, I'll listen to a report, I'll read a little bit of the newspaper, but, you know, I think for the most part. I think the trial is winding down now, and I think it's time to move on. Certainly, I'm not giving an opinion on what should happen, what should the penalty be, but my heart and soul goes out to all of the victims and all of the survivors. You know, I can't imagine every day. A lot of them are going to the courthouse every single day. They're being taken through this again. It's a very difficult time for them all, and my prayers are out to all the families that were involved. Last year, I will tell you, last year, the one thing after I got elected mayor of Boston that I thought would be something challenging was leading up to the one-year anniversary, how do you handle that as the new mayor? And we had the memorial on April 15th, which was incredible here in the city of Boston. A lot of emotions, but leading up to that, I had a chance to meet a lot of the people that were affected by the marathon, a lot of the family members. The day of the memorial was a very somber day here. But that next few days leading up to the marathon, I saw those same family members on Boylston Street, involved in different races. And on Marathon Monday, I watched, actually Laurie and myself watched a lot of the survivors, you know, kind of jump in at the very end and cross the finish line. I watched Jeff Ballman come back to the finish line. I watched Henry Richard on Saturday run his heart out down Boylston Street in a young relay race to win that race. A group of kids from Dorchester were running that race. A lot of inspiration, and the way I was asked the question, what was one of the most inspirational pieces of my first year as mayor? And it really was thinking back to the marathon a year before, how Boston rallied around the victims and the survivors, and how on Marathon Monday, the victims and survivors really, really rallied around us and said, it's okay, we're strong because of you, and it was an incredible feeling.
You and the police commissioner here have received a lot of credit when there are bad incidents, and bad incidents happen, of nothing happening here to mirror what has happened in other parts of the country. When you watch a Ferguson or something like that unfold, what do you do on your own checklist in terms of talking to your own people and making sure, you know, how would we handle something like this? And just what's your sense of, as a kid, my first year at Boston Latin School was the first year of forced busing. This is a city that has some pretty dark stains in its past on issues of race relations. What's your sense of the current climate now and how you handle the legitimate questions from the African American or another minority community about relations with the police department?
Well, first of all, the police commissioner is here with me, and I will say about Commissioner Evans, we have the greatest police commissioner in the United States of America right here in the city of Boston. He does an incredible job.
This should be a good time to ask for a raise.
The first thing that we did, appointing Commissioner Evans, I believe he was my second appointment, was we spoke about it, and he said we need to make sure that the command staff reflects the community of Boston. And we're able to, very quickly on, 50% of the command staff are people of color, to make sure that we have the diversity to be able to show a message to the community. He was also, when we took over, I believe we had one captain, active captains running districts. We had one captain of color, one captain running a district color. Today there's three. We're able to move two people in, move people around. Building relations with the community, building relationships with the clergy, building relationships with with the young people. We've been doing that constantly, just constantly going on and on and on. When Ferguson happened, to be honest with you, one of the I don't go home at night and really get concerned about my job. I do my job, go home, go to bed, wake up the next morning and have a new day. That night that Ferguson happened, very concerned about what could happen here in the city of Boston. I was watching what was going on in New York, what was going on in Ferguson, what was going on in LA, seeing in different parts of the country. Called the commissioner, and the commissioner had already reached out to people. Prior to the grand jury's decision, he had done it 3 weeks ahead of time, saying in anticipation of the grand jury's response, what would happen. And we had he had all the scenarios played out if they were going to move forward with the trial, if they weren't going to move forward with the trial. He had already laid the groundwork down. And I think that says a lot about his character and who he is as a police commissioner, but also the people that he has around him. You know, we had an incident the other night where a police officer got shot at point blank range. Thank God he's okay, he will be fine. And there was some tension around that shooting. And because of the groundwork that the commissioner and the police department have done, they were able to diffuse the situation out in the street and get answers out there right away to people and bring people in to talk about what happened. It's not a situation where we let it linger on for 2 and 3 and 4 or 5 days. You immediately address those concerns. And, you know, I'm proud of the work. I think we've had 4 protests in the city of Boston in the aftermath of Ferguson in New York. The The first protest, our police officers didn't have riot gear on, didn't have mace. We went out there and did our job. They did their job. I believe there were 12 arrests the first night. The second time there was a protest, same thing. I think there might have been 6. The third and fourth time, we had 0 arrests because we're able to work with the crowd, diffuse the crowd, and not have a mob mentality. So I think a lot of lessons are learned. Just to go back to your point, one thing that we do have to do in Boston, though, we have to have a discussion about race. Because there are some still deep scars from the busing area here in the city of Boston and before. We do have to have that conversation.
Let me interrupt you on that point. What are your memories of that? This pains me, but you're younger than me. And it hurts. No, but what are your personal memories of that?
I remember walking to school, St. Margaret's School, walking down Pond Street, and in front of the William E. Russell, seeing the motorcycle cops pull up with the school buses, and the kids getting off, going into school, and we'd be going to school. And then on the way home at night, in the afternoon, I remember the motorcycle cops and the buses coming, picking the kids up and taking them home. And a little bit of watching on TV, but there was no violence in the school that I saw. But every single day, we'd see the motorcycle cops come with grammar school kids into the school, and often think about, I'd walk to school. There was no escort. We didn't have police escort. We didn't have to worry about what was going to happen. So it was a tough time in Boston.
And where did you get your guidance? I suspect I know the answer, but I remember in those days when sometimes, the parents of your friends, you'd hear them saying things that make your head spin, and whoa, and you saw it in people who you thought were the kind and gentle people in the neighborhood. Some of them weren't so kind and gentle on these questions, and some political leaders in this city at the time, as you well know, were in there. And I remember distinctly, both my mother, but more so my father, who was a guard at the Charles Street Jail in those days, giving you the look and saying, you get involved in that, I won't repeat the word here, it's a family-friendly audience, and there's a camera rolling, then you won't have to deal with the police, or you won't have to deal with the violence, you'll have to deal with me. And then, more in-depth conversations, but it was made crystal clear that there were ways to behave and ways not to behave.
Yeah, I mean, in my household, certainly, when it came to the busing situation at the grammar school, there was never a problem around the school. So we didn't see what was happening in the high schools in Roxbury and in South Boston. We didn't see that. I mean, maybe on TV, but not there. But even in my house, I mean, I didn't realize this. I didn't think of this till after my father died. He never spoke. They never talked about in a negative way around the busing. Never talked in a negative way about other people, and it just never happened in my house. So I just didn't really. I started to learn more about busing as I got older and went to high school. I learned more about what happened with busing because I didn't hear it in my home. We didn't necessarily see it in the neighborhood necessarily because we weren't in one of the areas that were so controversial.
The issue of busing is an issue that remains in any big city, including in this city, which is the schools. If you had good schools for everybody, you wouldn't need a judge to tell you how to do things. And whether you think that decision was right or wrong, we won't go back in history. So you have a new superintendent who's about to come on board. Yep. Why Tommy Chang, and what do you view as the biggest challenge for him and for the mayor who has to help him?
I think Tommy Chang, first of all, because of his experience and being not the #1 person in a large school district, he's #2 in LA, but he also runs a district of 96,000 kids in his part of the district. We were fortunate here. We had 4 great candidates that were in the final here for superintendent of schools, and I think any one of them would have made a great candidate, but it was Tommy Chang's commitment to putting in place a system and building a team around him, and the way he spoke of the kids and the way he spoke of ELL, special education, traditional schools, traditional high schools, and really saying that Boston is right-sized to do wonderful things to turn this district, to make this district the best in the country. There's been some great things happening in our district. Right now in the city of Boston, we're not where we need to be. We have great teachers, we have some great leadership, we have great parents and great kids, but there's enough examples of schools that turned around that we should be able to turn on every school in our district, and we have to give everyone an opportunity. I want Boston school system a real choice for any parent to have an option for their child, whether it's a charter school, a public school, or a private school. I want Boston to be one of the choices that a parent can make.
The agreement on the longer school day was one of the things when you came into office. I'm sure you have vague memories of this. Was people said, "Here's the labor guy. Business is going to be suspicious of him, and is he going to stand up to the unions? Is he going to push the unions, whether it's negotiating benefits and contracts and the like, or something like that?" Take us inside how that worked and what lesson you drew from it.
Well, the first 100 days that in my administration, we were able to settle 5 contracts that had been expired for 2 or more years, and we were able to do it without going arbitration, without costing the city a boatload of money. We were able to sit down, have a fair negotiation. When it came to extended school day, it really was Richard Stutman, the president of the teachers union, and John McDonough sitting down and having conversations around how do we do this, how do we implement this when we get this, and it was a mutual respect at the table. And I talked to Richard and the leadership of the union in a lot of ways, and I think at the end of the day, teachers want to make sure that young people get a great opportunity to learn as well. So not in the last couple of years, but before that, people kind of villainize teachers as they're the problem with what's going on in our system. And now all of a sudden, it's not the teachers, and I'm glad for that. But extending the school day was a very important issue for me. But it was also, at the end, after we were done with it, it was also a very important issue for the teachers union to be able to move a system along. And the way we're implementing this, we got extended school day for 60 schools in the city of Boston. We're not doing all 60 at one time. We're doing 20 schools a year over the course of the next 3 years, not because of cost, but to get it right. So we're able to extend the school day so we can see direct outcomes in those schools as we extend the day.
Take the term direct outcomes and tell me, we're at an institute that celebrates a great president and that tries to inspire younger people to talk about leadership. And I'm going to close with a question specifically about JFK, but I want to stay on this point before we go to questions from the audience about direct outcomes. You talked about the transition from going from the legislature to being the CEO. How do you judge yourself, and how do you judge those who work for you in terms of setting a bar and then enforcing it, and sometimes having to look in the mirror and say, I was wrong about that?
Well, one of the ways we look at direct outcomes is by using a lot of data, and my administration has used data more than any other administration in the history of the city of Boston. And in my office, we have 4 data dashboards that really have information on everything from schools to permitting to Twitter feeds to violence to anything you can imagine that's up there. And it really is looking at the direct outcomes. I meet my cabinet every Friday. We have a meeting. We go through the different issues that are concerning in different cabinets. Once a month, one of those Fridays every month is a meeting where we sit down and go through data and information to learn best practices and to figure out to make sure the outcomes are there. That's something that's very important. And also at the bottom, it is about quality of life as well and seeing how people feel about the city of Boston. And I hear it out there when I talk to people. I know when people are happy with what's going on here, when they see positive things happening. When it comes to education, I'm not going to necessarily, I think the MCAS are important, or the PARCC test that's coming in, it's important. It's not the only way to judge how a child is doing. I'm going to look at after a high school, are they going to college? Is there a process to track them through college to make sure that not only do we get young people from our schools into college, but are they actually graduating college? And secondly, working on a pathway. Thank you. Working on a pathway to a career. I'm not a traditional student. I graduated Boston College when I was 42 years old. I didn't graduate when I was, 22. And so we have to prepare our young people for a career as well. So when they get out of school, because what happens is if we get it right in education, we're going to see all these other numbers. We're going to see the poverty numbers go down. We're going to see the crime numbers go down. We're going to see the homicides go down. We're going to see the shootings go down. All of that stuff, because a lot of the kids that are on the street now causing the violence in America, what is the common thread? Some of them come out of very tough families, but mostly all of them dropped out of school. Every single one of them. And if we can keep them in school and put them on a pathway to college or a career when they graduate high school, we will see huge outcomes in this country.
How is your day different today than it was your first week as mayor? What have you done to change your routine to make yourself, A, more efficient? I assume you've learning some things on the job, and B, you mentioned when you go home at night, you try to leave the job until you wake up in the morning. But what's your mental health time, for lack of a better term?
Between probably like 9 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. My day's busy. As mayor of the city of Boston, it's one issue after another. People will read the newspaper, and for example, you pick up the paper, read about the Olympics. The Olympics are about 10 minutes of my day. really, when you think about it. It's constant changing. It's meeting with people. It's talking to department heads. It's coming up with processes. Every day is different. No 2 days have been the same as mayor of the city of Boston. You know, it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of preparing for meetings, getting ready to go into different events. It's a lot of face-to-face, shaking hands, meeting people. You know, my day started this morning. I think it started this morning at 7:30. My first meeting, I was out of the house at 7 o'clock this morning. First meeting at 7:30. I think I had about 12 meetings today, all day long in different places. I made a couple stops during the day in different places to talk to folks. I'll end it tonight at 9 o'clock. I'll go home. I have a read file. I'll read this information for tomorrow. I'll go to bed, wake up in the morning, do it all over again. I tried to keep Sundays open as best I could. Sometimes we have a little bit going on Sundays, but it's demanding. As mayor of the city of Boston, people want to see you. They expect to see you out in the street. I mean, I've been told your schedule is crazy and you're everywhere. That's what people in Boston expect, a mayor who's everywhere. I mean, I'll get to say this, Mayor Menino, and before him, Mayor Flynn set the bar really high. I mean, I don't really remember Mayor White. I'm sure he did as well. But they set the bar high. They were accessible to the community, to the neighborhood. They're both regarded as neighborhood mayors. People in the neighborhood love them both, and that's what people in Boston expect.
My memory of my dad was active in the union at the Charles Street Jail and had to negotiate sometimes with Mayor White. And from my dad in those days, I learned how son of a bitch could be a one-syllable word. That's how.
I'm sure I'm described that way once in a while too.
Quite remarkable how it would just come out and just one little stuff. To describe your personal philosophy, you mentioned the data dashboards, and big data in some ways makes our lives easier, and it brings us information that helps us make decisions. It can also overwhelm you. So what's your sense as a politician of how much of it is based on the data, your team, which can tell you if you say this, Mr. Mayor, 63% of the residents of Boston are going to think you're great, and if you say that, 78% are going to think you're a nut job. Sometimes there's too much data, and sometimes too much polling and too much else. How do you balance the data with your gut?
It depends on the issue. A lot of it is the gut. I had a lunch this afternoon for the college presidents in Boston, and BU was saying to me that they based their days off on our days off, and that we got it right every single time this winter. And you really think about it's your gut. A lot of it is your gut, your instincts, and talking to the folks around you on their gut instincts as well, and not having to be, it's all about me. Because it's not all about me. Granted, I'm the mayor and I'm on the ballot and I'm the face of City Hall, but it really is about a lot of the folks that are sitting in the first 2 rows here are cabinet or department heads in the city of Boston, and I depend tremendously on them in their views on things. And also Laurie. I mean, I'll talk to Laurie a lot about different things at night as well and bounce ideas off her and see what her reaction is. But I think it's important for a leader to lead and let his or her people do their job. So some of it's gut, some of it's data, depending on the issue. But when you're talking about outcomes for young people, I think data is very important. When you're talking about personal people, it's your gut.
Is there an issue in the first year where you realize at some point, boy, Marty, you're just dead wrong on this one?
I don't know if I'd say dead wrong. I don't think I've had that issue yet. I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure it's coming. I think, I've been, like I said, my first year, and even now, a lot of times I'll sit down and think and reflect and think about how fortunate I am to be sitting in the seat I am. Son of 2 people left Ireland, came to this country, had 2 boys, and I'm the mayor of the city of Boston. I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful every day for this job. And I think that's what keeps me not thinking that I failed. And I'm not afraid to admit if I did something wrong. I'll admit it and say I did something wrong. I'm not afraid to admit.
I was going back to reading some old clips from the beginning of the campaign, just trying to remind me. I follow, I live out of town now. I'm going to come back someday. I still say Boston's home when people ask me. My 2 favorite jobs growing up, we're going to backup catcher for the Red Sox and mayor of Boston. Turned out a little different than I had envisioned. But the Boston Globe, in a profile of you, describes you as someone who campaigns with relentless enthusiasm of a golden retriever fetching a tennis ball.
I lost 35 pounds. I tell people all the time when they're running for office to take time for yourself. And I think in the campaign for mayor, I think I took about 3.5 days off in total, maybe. 4th of July was one of those times. But I just get into it. I mean, I get into it. And the thing about it, campaigning in Boston was incredible because you get a chance to get into every single neighborhood and hear people's concerns, and you get a chance to meet real people, and that's how I do it. And you know, I thought when I came into the job I'd be able to slow down a bit, and I haven't. I think I as mayor, I do it the same way.
There's another line in this profile that jumped out at me, and I'm going to read it to you, and then we'll get to questions in just a minute, so please get ready. We have 2 microphones in the room. Alcoholism, bullets, and cancer can give a man perspective. Yeah. How so?
Alcohol and cancer is something that is a 7-year-old kid. I had Burkitt's lymphoma, came down with cancer. I didn't really understand at the time what I was going through, but as I got older, I understand what I had as a young child, that I could have died over it, and understanding that surviving that as a young person and putting it into perspective as an older person helped me. Being in recovery every day allows me the opportunity, as a candidate, gave me the edge every single day because I did as much as I could in that particular day. And when I went home, I was grateful for what I had experienced that day. As mayor of the city of Boston, when I say this, most days that I get home, I leave the job at the front door. I don't take it in with me. There's been a couple instances. The night after Ferguson, I certainly was concerned about what happened in Boston, what was going to happen in Boston. There's been a couple other incidents. The night after 2 firefighters died on the Beacon Street fire. I took that home with me that night. You know, during their services, I took it home with me that night. But being in recovery gives me the edge every single day to understand that tomorrow's a new day. So no matter what the struggles of today are, and no matter what's written about me or what's said about me or what I did right or wrong, that all stays in the day. The next day is a brand new day. So all my successes today, I can't carry them forward tomorrow. It's a new day.
When did he decide? When did he decide he would run for mayor? I don't know. When I was 10?
Yeah, when I was young. I mean, I remember.
Why mayor?
Because it's the best job in America. I just, you know, I remember just being, my father and uncle were very active politically, always holding signs with somebody. And I remember my Uncle Pat was the business agent for the Laborers Union. He had a bumper sticker. And it was Patrick Pat Walsh, business manager at Local 223, and I wanted my name on a bumper sticker. So, honest to God, when I ran for state representative, I took his colors, but I flipped them over, and I ran for state representative. And, you know, you get elected state representative, and the first thought in your head is, okay, I'm running for mayor. It's just the best job in the world. And I've said this before, and I know I won, and people say, well, you'd feel differently. It was about running for mayor of Boston. I enjoyed, and I won. It was a bonus, and I'm sure I would have been upset if I didn't win, but it wouldn't have been life-ending for me. But just running for this job is incredible, and being in this position, you know, I have to enjoy it every single day. Again, depending on what the challenges are, because someday it's going to end, and someday I'm going to walk out of that office and not be the mayor anymore, and I'll be able to say for a period of time, I don't want to be able to just say I was the mayor. I want to be able to look back and all of our team look back and say, we were responsible for the highest drop in crime in the history of Boston. We're able to turn around the most schools. We're able to get the most people off the street, homelessness, drop homelessness. Those are the things that I want to be able to say, not for me, but Felix Arroyo was part of a cabinet that did things around reducing homelessness and hunger in the city of Boston. You know, Austin Blackman were able to get on a position to have the greatest numbers in energy efficiency in the city of Boston. Michael Denny were able to deliver city services better than anywhere else in the country. The different folks that are here today be able to talk about. Gina Fandaca were able to turn around the transportation system in the city of Boston to really lay down a network so bicyclists, walkers, runners, and cars can coexist on a roadway, and we're able to do it better than any other city in the country. Those are the things that I want to be able to look back on. I want all these folks that are here with me tonight and the folks that are back at City Hall to be able to say, I was part of that. Just like when I was a kid driving in town and my father would say, I built that building there. You know, he didn't build it himself, but he worked in that project. I want people to be able to point back and say,
he built that.
He built a lot of them. I built some of them too. But you know, I want, you know, that's how I want to be. Go out.
Please line up if you have questions, folks. I'm going to keep asking questions until people raise their hands and line up at the microphone. So please don't be shy and line up and do that. If they're ready to go, let's go. Let's involve the folks here in the crowd. Sir, please.
Mr. Mayor, congratulations on your first year. I know the word snow is probably a 4-letter word you never ever want to hear again, so I won't ask you about that. But a couple of weeks ago, BU announced that their tuition for next year is going to be over $63,000. That's, I think, absurd. I think that the worry that a lot of people have is the fact that there is no middle class anymore for them to afford a 4-year school. And what are your thoughts on that, please, sir?
Well, we created, thank you for the question, first of all. We created something different in our cabinet, Chief of Education. We do have the Superintendent of Schools, which is in the cabinet, but we also created the Chief of Education. And that role is to work with the private schools, the Catholic schools, the parochial schools, the public schools, the charter schools, and also the universities and colleges. And it's something, we had a conversation today. I met with all the college presidents from Boston today. And it's a beginning of a dialogue for them to offer more opportunities for kids from the city of Boston. But also, we have to look at ways of trying to bring the cost down. The problem is that they're private institutions, so I have no discretion over bringing the cost down. So we do have to do something, because the kids in Boston or anywhere in Massachusetts, to go to a school, a lot of them are being forced to leave the state because it's cheaper for them to go to a school outside the state than actually a school inside the state of Massachusetts. So that's an issue that we have to work on.
Please, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question about the Casey overpass in Jamaica Plain. It's coming down. Each vehicle that goes over it today will face 5 additional traffic signals on the ground.
Yeah.
The Department of Transportation tells us that will add 1 minute to each driver that use it today. 24,000 vehicles use it each day. That's 24,000 minutes, 400 hours, additional traffic, frustrated drivers, traffic, idling at red lights, using gasoline, and spewing emissions that they don't use today. The project doesn't make sense. What do you feel should happen there?
Well, thank you for the question. That's an issue that was brought up in the mayor's race, and a lot of us were asked the question in the mayor's race about that. And the problem with that is that the project's been decided, and the awarding of the contract has been done, and it's a state project. It's not a city project. I know there was city approvals that happened prior to my administration, and it's moving forward. And I think there's going to be concerns about the traffic patterns in that area. I mean, I personally like the overpass, because anytime I'd go to West Roxbury before I was mayor or as mayor, I'd take the overpass down to West Roxbury. But that issue, for the most part, because the state would not retreat back, and I had several meetings with the Secretary of Transportation in the state of Massachusetts, along with State Representative Liz Malia, to try and pull back. But that project is down the road, and I don't think the new administration is going to pull back on it.
Yeah, two-part question, but I'll be quick. One on Glass-Steagall. I know this was brought up to you last week. Someone brought up a potential of the mayor's conference supporting Glass-Steagall. I know that O'Malley has brought this up in his campaign. There's a lot of support for it, and there was also a report of some of these Wall Street bankers threatening other Democrats that they would withhold money if they go with Glass-Steagall and things like this. So I was wondering if you had anything to say on that, but also on the fact that now 47 nations just joined this new AIIB bank, which was supposed to be not too many, and this was a big change. So people are getting a sense that they're sort of jumping ship from this Wall Street system and joining with the BRICS. So it seems to me like really these Wall Street banks are just desperate, that their threats are empty threats, and it's really a bankrupt system that's on its last legs. So I mean, shouldn't we really just put this policy through, shut down this policy with Glass-Steagall, and actually make decisions for our own interest again?
I'm not. You saying Glass-Steagall?
Yes. Glass-Steagall, yeah.
Yeah. I'll get back to you on that. I don't think we don't have a position. Honestly, we don't have a position on it. I'll get back to you on. Can I get back to you on that after this?
Well, Bill Ferguson was the one who asked you last week, and you said you were going to take it up at the mayor's conference and get back to us, and he's been trying to reach you for the last week.
He doesn't call my office because I didn't get a message from him. But let me talk to you after this about that.
Okay.
Sir.
Everybody in life has a management style, whether you're running a home with 10 kids or you're a Fortune 500 company or, in your case, a huge city. I'm interested in your management style. Now, the Harvard B School advocates the 3 Ds of management. D is in Delta. The first is decide. The second is delegate. And then the third is depart. In other words, get out of the way of the guy who you're giving the job to. Now, of course, Ronald Reagan had the 4th D, which was disavow. But we'll forget that one. Anyways, could you just discuss if you advocate this 3D management style to any degree? Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to be hands-on all the time. I'd be interested to hear your comments about that.
I'm pretty hands-on, but I think there's a lot of, I have a different style in a lot of different ways. I don't think I have per se a different, I don't know, I'd have to ask, I guess, some people here about what my style is, but some of it's delegate, depending on the different issues that we have. Some of it's decide. That's the one thing that John asked me earlier about, you have to make decisions like that, and particularly on issues that come down the pike every single day. So it's probably delegate and decide in a lot of cases. I mean, I think it's important. You have to have, I feel, for a $2.8 billion industry, which the city of Boston is, 18,000 employees, 640,000 people living in the city of Boston, you can't run it on you can't make every decision. You have to delegate and have people work, and you have to have faith in the people that you put around you. And I have tremendous faith in the folks that are around me. So a lot of it is delegate, and I'm sure that some of them might say, well, you don't delegate everything, you decide a lot. But I think it's a little bit of everything. Thank you, sir.
This way, sorry. Here and then here. Go ahead.
Hi. I appreciate that you brought up homelessness as one of the goals of something that you want to have stand in the good ground on. I went to college in Boston, and I volunteered a lot downtown with homelessness and was really proud of how Boston handled homelessness, and then moved back to Boston and found the Long Island Shelter and all the transitional programs, and was really proud of how Boston handles homelessness. And obviously, the closure of the bridge was a setback, and I'm hoping to be able to feel proud of how we handle homelessness once again. And
well,
I think you
can feel proud of the way we handle homelessness right now. I mean, I know that there was a story in the paper the other day saying the shelter is not ready, but during this very terrible winter, the month of February, we were able to basically keep our shelters open for 24 hours. Every single person that wanted a bed had a bed. Thank God, and I didn't say this publicly when it was going through, but I was concerned one of these nights, one of these mornings, I would have gotten a call from the commissioner saying that we lost somebody last night who froze to death, and thank God we didn't lose anybody, to my knowledge, this winter of freezing to death. We built out a state-of-the-art shelter, first phase of it the other day. We're building out the second phase of it. Will be done, I think, I don't want to give a timeline because I'll be held to it by the press, but within the next couple of months. It's too long to do, but we have a process as well. For those of you that don't understand, and John, for you, October 28th, 6th of last year, Michael Denny came into my office with one of the engineers and said the Long Island Bridge has to be shut down because it's crumbling. I had to make a very difficult decision. People said you handled it wrong, you didn't handle it right. The bridge was crumbling. We shut the bridge down. We had to close down 2 detoxes, 3 holding programs, some halfway houses, and the shelter, and try to relocate them. And we're pretty close to relocating almost every single program, but it's difficult. Something I didn't want to do. Long Island Bridge, which you can see out the window, half of it's gone now. It might almost all be gone. It'll be gone next weekend. About a week after we shut it down, one of the light towers on the bridge fell. About 3 weeks after we shut it down, one of the water main on the bottom fell off 5 tons into the ocean. The bridge is literally falling apart. It's not something I wanted to do, but we're going to make sure those programs get stronger. One thing that came out of closing Long Island Bridge, which is a blessing, it forced the city of Boston to take a look at how we do homelessness in the city of Boston. Prior to that, for the most part, we housed people nightly and gave them a meal, and the next morning we put them back out in the street, and then they'd come back the next night for a bed. What we're looking at now is how do we handle homelessness, and how do we truly put in programs that will reduce and end homelessness.
Please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Mary Hancock. I'd like to know if there's any big data about trees in the city.
Yeah, there is.
As I walk around, I see that trees are dying, and sometimes stumps are in the sidewalk rather than trees. And I'm just worried that the city's not as attractive as it could be, and maybe this would be an issue as the Olympic bid was.
No, thank you. That's a great question. Last year, the Emerald Necklace Conservancy actually released a report of all the trees around the Emerald Necklace. I think there's something like, I don't know what the number is. It's something like 40, 50,000 trees in the care of each one and what their shape is. And we planted more trees last year in the city of Boston than any other time. I think we did over 1,000. This year we're trying to up that number, planting more trees in the city of Boston. When I did the budget last year, the city had 1 arborist, and there was an 18-month wait to get your tree trimmed. We increased that number. I believe we have 3 arborists now in the city of Boston. We're putting more money into the safety of the trees and making sure they're safe. We're planting different street trees now. In the past, where the city planted street trees that actually pulled up the sidewalk, and in a lot of cases, those trees had to be cut down to fix the sidewalk. The new trees being planted will not be pulling up, the roots won't be pulling up the sidewalk. It's something that we put a lot of emphasis on. I don't know if Chris is here, but our Parks and Recreation Department, we put a lot of emphasis on planting more and more trees, and we're trying to plant thousands more trees a year. Thank you.
Please.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask you 2 questions, maybe a little lighthearted. First, when do you generally believe you might get back to Karna?
What's that again?
When do you think you might really get back to Karna again?
I'm hoping not this September, but next September. BC's playing over in Crow Park, so I would like to sneak back for the game and then go right down to Karna.
Sounds good.
I'd like to do it tomorrow, but can't.
Yeah, they'll be happy to hear that. And the second question was, you described your schedule. It's very energetic, and just as Mayor Menino's was. When do you get a chance to personally exercise?
When I get in and out of the car, I pull up on the thing. I do like chin-ups. Yeah, there's not much of that going on. Thank you for the question, though.
Good evening,
Need a
Mr. Mayor.
fitness advisor.
Good evening.
Please.
First, I'd like to wish you an early happy birthday.
Oh, thank
you and
you.
I share birthdays. So.
That's great.
She's younger than me, too.
To further our connection, I just wanted to let you know that I personally support you in your efforts to bring the Olympics to Boston.
Thank you.
I think it's a wonderful effort.
Thank you.
Along that line, we can expect considerable construction to be going on should we succeed in your efforts to bring the Olympics here. And I wondered what, if any, plans were in place to make sure that City of Boston residents were involved in whatever construction had to be done to get the city ready for the Olympics.
Well, let me just talk about right now. Right now in the city of Boston, we have $8 billion worth of construction going on as we speak. We have another $16 billion that has been approved through the permitting process, and we have $2 billion in the pipeline. So right now we have an awful lot of construction in the pipeline here in the city of Boston. The Olympics would add to that, but I think the forecast for construction in the city, certainly as long as the economy continues to go the way it's going, is going well. I think the one issue that we want to do in City Hall is make sure we bring in opportunity to every neighborhood. In the city of Boston, some neighborhoods have been left behind for a lot of years, and we need to create more opportunities. Once these buildings are built, really have to create more opportunities for jobs across all categories. Our unemployment rate in the city of Boston right now is 4.5%, but our unemployment rate in communities of color is significantly higher. So we have to create opportunities in a lot of neighborhoods to help people.
That's great. Okay, we'll take these last 2 questions, and I'll close with 1 or 2 quick ones for the mayor. Sir.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for this evening. The question I have for you is, in this room you have a lot of wonderful people, but in particular you have the New Frontier Network. And, the goal there is to sort of engage more young people. And you've spoken this evening wonderfully about the efforts in regards to education and getting involved. I thought maybe you could take this moment and give some comments or recommendations, suggestions on what this group, New Frontier Network, could necessarily be doing to make the city of Boston an even better place, particularly as you talk about race relations, LGBT issues, and other issues of the kind.
No, thank you. I want to first of all congratulate you for your work, and we have to. I know Dan Coe's involved, and a lot of my cabinet's involved already, and people in City Hall are involved. So I think that's the first step, having a connection, not only young people to City Hall, but City Hall to young people. I think that's an important piece. We have the 1 in 3 council in the city of Boston, which we've increased the size of the 1 in 3 council with young people under the age of 30, the fastest growing population in our city. We're the youngest city per capita in the United States of America, of a major city, which is exciting. But we also, our youth council, which is younger kids, we more than quadruple the size of our youth council, where high schoolers have a chance to be involved in the process. And we give them, in the budget last year, we gave them $1 million for them to budget and spend where they thought was the right way to do it. And we're doing another $1 million this year. And I'll tell you, they came back with some brilliant ideas of designing playgrounds and planting more trees and things like that. So we're trying to do more outreach, and really we're changing, we're really a data-driven and also a social media-driven city hall in some cases. With Twitter and social media, we've done a lot of Facebook, we've done a lot of Twitter chats, we've done some Facebook chats, we've done a lot of events at District Hall. So we're doing a lot to reach out to young people. I think it's important for young people to be tied into government, not necessarily the way my father might have or your father was, but I think people have to get involved in their government because it does make a difference. So we will be involved with New Frontier as well.
Please.
Hi, I'm from Roxbury, and I live in the area around the Dearborn School.
Yep.
And as you know, there have been 2 editorials in the Globe, and the Massachusetts Historic Commission has written the city of Boston on 3 separate occasions and told them that their interpretation of the guidelines with regard to preservation is wrong, and that the school building, the Dearborn building, can't be torn down without investigating alternative sites. And despite the fact that 1,000 people in that neighborhood have said, we want the school to be built, but in a neighborhood with so many vacant lots, and the vacant lots are there because of thoughtless urban renewal, we can't really understand, and we can't seem to connect with anybody in your administration, and we've met with you as well, that understands why in a neighborhood that has 2 Federal Register historic districts, why is it not possible to consider building on a vacant lot that's a larger lot that offers a lot of the amenities or the characteristics that people like to see in modern school buildings. And before I go, I just also want to say I live in Roxbury, and we have a great relationship with the police. And that's not true of every section in Roxbury, but we have a great relationship with Captain Davin, and we really support the police. So
Thank you very much. The captain's great, and thank you for the question. The Dearborn School is a school in Roxbury that, before I became mayor of the city of Boston, was a school that was applied to by the past administration to build, with the school building authority, which gets a reimbursement from the state, to build a new school. There was a process that wasn't a perfect process, I guess, before I took over, about notifying community and the abutters that they were going to build a new school. The problem, we have 2 things. One is the city doesn't feel that that building is a historic building, number one. And that's being played out right now. And the second piece is, if we can't just move that school to another location, because you can't just move the approval of the school building authority over to another location. You can't. You know, you're saying it's not true to me, but you can't do that. You can ask the school building authority, and what happens is the young kids that are in the Dearborn, it's a STEM academy, it's going to be a STEM school, it's going to be a state-of-the-art school, and I personally feel that our young people deserve brand new schools in the city of Boston. We have 122 schools in the city right now, of which we've built about 3 new schools in the last 20 years. We need to upgrade all our facilities, and that's what, if we pull back on that project, our young people in that school will lose out, and that building will sit empty probably for 50 more years, and it will become historic because there's nothing we can do with it because the school department owns it. Pardon me? No, I agree. I mean, there's plenty. There are not plenty. There are vacant lots around. But if we pull out this application, we don't get the reimbursement from the state, which doesn't allow us to build new schools. In the city of Boston, we have $140 million bonding capacity per year, of which most of that bonding capacity is filled up with other programs, with parks and school building, not school buildings, with parks and any other type of capital improvements we have. We don't have the capacity to build new schools. We probably need, right now in the city of Boston, probably about $4 billion of new schools built in the city of Boston. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to visit some of our schools. You're either walking into a school that was built in the 1930s that's falling apart, or you built a school in the 1970s that looks like a cinder block prison. We have to do better for our kids.
Two questions before we close. One is for this institution, and one is just my thought listening to some of this play out. You have a new Republican governor here, and I work in a town that's, over the past, well, I've been there 25 years now, has become almost completely dysfunctional. and I'm not blaming both. I would say both.
Tying it in?
I would say both parties. No, I would say both parties are to blame for it. I'm just wondering, in some of these conversations, whether it's about infrastructure, whether it's about homelessness, and there are national issues involved with that, whether it's federal funding, or whether it's just a conversation about mental health, or conversations of what to do with people, whether it's veterans in some cases. Do you have any sense, when you meet with your other mayors and when you meet with the new governor here, about any potential for opening in the, what I'll just call the gridlock mess, or are you on your own in some ways?
As far as Washington goes?
Yeah.
I think it's very sad what's going on in Washington. I mean, I'm a Democrat. Charlie Baker's a Republican. He's been governor now for about 79 days. And we've been able to, I think he is. We've been working on a whole host of issues together. We're talking about, getting money from the federal government to reimburse for the plowing and a whole bunch of things. And I think, going down to Washington, I think that might benefit us here, that I'm a Democrat, he's a Republican. But I think, the fact that Washington is stalemate, and neither side, in a lot of ways, are agreeing on anything. You got to agree on something. There got to be something you can agree on. And what they're doing, I think, what's happening in Washington, D.C., and I'll blame the leadership of both sides and both parties. They're gridlocking the country, and they're crippling the country, and it's unfair to the residents of this country. When it comes to immigration, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was a bipartisan bill that nearly went through both branches and became the law. Today, all of a sudden, that bill is no good. When you talk about funding of housing authorities, they're cutting back on funding of housing authorities. It's going to be this budget's going to be our first time in Boston that we actually have to make an appropriation to our housing authority. These are poor people that live in housing developments, and Washington can't agree on that. When you talk about shutting down Homeland Security, when you talk any issue that comes up down in Washington, I think it's a disgrace. I think at some point people in America are going to revolt, and there's going to be problems in Washington, D.C., and long-term folks that have been there for a long time won't be in office. This Monday, we had the dedication of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute, and John McCain told a story where Ted and himself would work on Senator Kennedy and Senator McCain would work on legislation, and they would pass bipartisan legislation. He told of a story where they'd have vicious fights, but when they walked out of the chamber, they were friends. That's not what you're hearing today out of Washington, D.C. We need some of that back here. We need to understand you have to be able to work with the other side. Democrats, even though I think we're always right, we can't always be right. And the Republicans can't always be wrong. So I think there's an opportunity. They have to move the country forward. It's starting to, I think what's happening is they're empowering mayors around the country. That's the one thing I see, common theme with the mayors, is that the mayors are becoming the focal point of cities and certainly of states, because we're the ones that can get things done. And I hope the federal government will open their eyes to what's going on down there. And I'm using the buzzwords gridlock, but smarten up.
Let me end the conversation by, as we're allowed to do in Boston, and particularly on this ground, I think, shifting from the Teddy conversation to the Jack conversation. They ask everyone who comes to this forum to close with a personal thought about it, and it was interesting what Heather said in the introduction about your age and not having a living memory of President Kennedy. What did John F. Kennedy mean to you growing up as a legacy, especially for someone who got involved in public service? And where do you see his example and his path as being relevant today?
I grew up in an Irish Catholic home, and this is a true story. In my grandmother's house in Ireland when I was a kid, it was Pope Paul and John F. Kennedy and Robert with the candles under them. I would have stories of my mother and talking about it. So on the day he was assassinated, there'd be conversation in my house every single year. My mother and father, where they were that day. My mother was working in a rectory, and she heard the news, and she was crying. My father was working construction at that time. So I grew up in a house, kind of the Kennedys were very, very, very big in the Walsh house. As I grew older and I got a chance to watch what his legacy was, really the fights that he had in civil rights, the fights he had. I was here a few months ago, and there was a video about the Women's Commission that the Senator put forth, and people were laughing about it, seeing it in the 60s, that it wasn't as progressive as it is today. But the fact that he was able to do that, and really set the bar. He really kind of broke away from Washington politics and and I think because of his age and what he did, what he fought for, learning from his grandfather before him who fought for immigrants in this country. So I think John F. Kennedy set the bar, set the standard very high for a change in the way we look at social issues here in this country. I think his brother Ted learned from that and certainly took that to a whole new level. And I think if President Kennedy was able to live out his life and not be assassinated, I think his record of accomplishment would have been incredible, certainly around civil rights, voting rights, women's rights. I think we would have had a very different country a lot earlier than we do today. I'll tell you a quick Kennedy story. When I was running for state representative, we had a debate on this stage in this room. And I remember my knees were shaking. I got out of my car, I walked over, and I saw the presidential seal. And for some reason, the fear in my body went out, and I came up here. I was just proud to be part of this stage, that the President of the United States, who this building is named after, and everything in this building, he was from Boston, and that meant an awful lot to me.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time. We thank everybody in the room for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you.